It's the show where Hawaii's newsmakers come to talk and to take your questions live. From the nation's capital to Honolulu Hale, from the state legislature to the fifth floor. We bring the experts to you and ask them what you want to know. Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Pillay-Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.
Well, aloha, and thanks for tuning in here on this Wednesday. We hope you all had a great Valentine's Day. I'm Ryan Pillay-Suji, joined by Yanji Denise, and this is Spotlight Hawaii on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. And this morning, we're focusing in on an area of Oahu that has really been the center of a lot of improvement and really, as the mayor lays out his future and hopes for what he believes this area can become.
That's right. We are talking about Chinatown. You know, if you look back through the archives of political debates and promises, you see that many, many mayors over the years have promised to revitalize this area. So what will be different this time? We've invited two folks who know a lot about this area and represent it in different ways. We welcome Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos-Tam and community advocate and neighborhood board member Chulan Schubert-Kwock to the discussion this morning. Thank you both for being here. Chulan, I want to start with you. You've obviously been a big part of this community for some time. How would you characterize the neighborhood at this point? Are we in an area of decline, or do you think things are improving?
Things are improving, definitely. And I think this
Please go ahead.
I think this mayor is very sincere, and I have worked with some members of his administration over the years, notably Mike Formby, whom we trust. And so we had meetings with him individually, and we also had meetings with the mayor. And it didn't hurt to have the mayor's wife, who is Chinese and very involved with Creative City, to bring back the arts and culture, which we have seen 2 concerts at Dr. Sun Yat-sen Memorial Park. And fortunately also that Dr. Sun Yat-sen Park has been finished with clearing the Bat-Smiley Pond, and it got fenced up. It's really nice. It's a good venue for our downtown Chinatown. And we are now focusing on Dr. Sun Yat-sen Mall to bring River Street and the area where you have the temples, the historic areas, to really enhance that area and brighten it up, enliven it, re-energize it, so we can see the perimeter of Chinatown changing.
Okay.
So I'm also very hopeful with Tyler, who is energetic and sincere about wanting to make and be part of the change.
Let's hear from Tyler now. Councilmember, what are you hearing from your constituents about how they are feeling about the neighborhood at this point?
You know, I think there's a lot of hope for improvement. As Chulan mentioned, you know, the mayor has made Chinatown a priority. I'm very glad to hear that. You know, Chinatown is kind of where a lot of our cities and a lot of our islands issues come together. Crime, homelessness, you know, the need for more affordable housing, the need for economic revitalization. And so this really can be a test bed for some of our strategies. What I am hearing is there is a lot of hope for improvement. People have seen some improvement now that the pandemic's over, now that people are starting to come back into Chinatown. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done on these big issues, but also on small issues that face Chinatown as well.
Well, let's talk about one of the biggest issues that has plagued this area, and that has just been homelessness that have been in the area. There have been obviously multiple reports of crime that has also happened to local business owners down there, and the safety concerns that existed and continue to still exist. Tyler, we'll start off with you. How would you describe some of the improvements being made to address some of the crime issues that have plagued this area in the past?
Yeah, first and foremost, you know, getting the COVID money through the SLFRF funding has really helped. The mayor at the beginning of January announced almost $650,000 for additional policing in Chinatown. But one critical piece of this is that as part of a condition of using these funds, the additional police officers that are funded through this have to be out on foot patrol. And this is really important because, you know, it's one thing to be sitting in the blue and white police car. It's another thing to be driving around, but to be on foot, to be there and be very present on the streets is really reassuring to the business owners, to the residents, and really helps to deter, the criminals in the area. I was in Chinatown last summer and saw a woman's purse be snatched, and there happened to be an undercover officer nearby who was able to apprehend the suspect. And if he wasn't there, though, this poor woman would have been out, her money, her grocery money, and she would have been in a much more difficult situation. And so having that direct presence is so important.
Chulan, same question for you regarding what we've seen with crime and homelessness specifically. How have things improved, or have they improved? What are you hearing and seeing with the homeless in that area?
Well, number one, with the removal of feeding in Chinatown, that was a tremendous and very huge impact on Chinatown businesses, because we're not having people staying on the sidewalk for hours waiting for the next meal. Removing the location of feeding has the number one biggest impact in 2 decades. Number one, that's done by this administration. Number two, they focus on drugs. That is the biggest issue leading to homelessness and petty crime and sidewalk violations. The drug is the biggest issue for decades in Chinatown, much bigger than gambling. So we are pleased to know that there have been over 100 arrests on drugs. And we want to focus on more arrests, rehab on drugs. And that will help the homelessness, because once their mental capacity is stabilized, they can then accept help to go to shelters or housing. Without this fundamental issue tackled by the law enforcement, plus various programs to help them, alternative programs like no jail but treatment, and the hurdle we have now is not the police, it's not the prosecutor, it's not the will, it's the courts. They are not sentencing folks to treatment. They're not sentencing them based on ACT guidelines, even though there have been piles and piles of data accumulated by the police to assist the prosecutor's office in recommending these sentences. So also on sit-like violation, we were just told yesterday by our commander that the courts just let them go and they come and repeat the same bad behavior. So these are some of the things that bother us a lot. And police on foot is critical. We have been advocating for foot patrol every time for years and years. And so now there's a commitment to that. And we also asked the police department to look into not letting active police officers to be on construction sites off duty, since we have such a shortage of police officers. Let them work active and pay them whatever they would lose on the second job, so that we have active police officers that we sorely need. And then call on the reservists to come in, and they can also arrest that are checked and not just give warnings. So I think building up the data of arrests will help convince the courts to sentence accurately.
Tyler, I want to follow up on what she just said. We've had Steve Alm on this program, and he's talked about weed and seed and all the efforts that they are making in Chinatown with that particular problem. You obviously have the foot patrols coming in. You have the mayor doing what he's doing. Do you think that the judiciary is the sort of weakest link in all of this?
Yeah, I would agree. And, in talking with the prosecutor's office, they have staffing issues as well. And so as we go through next year's budget, as part of the city council's deliberation, I'm going to be very insistent that we provide our prosecutor's office with additional funds. As Chulan points out, these people with the sit-lie violations, with some of the drug violations, it ends up being a revolving door. They end up back out on the streets in Chinatown and continuing to sort of perpetuate this bad behavior. And so, want to make sure that they're adequately funded. On the other hand, there are a number of other nonprofit groups, social service providers that are doing work as well, and they need to be uplifted because this is a multifaceted issue, and it's going to take a lot of people coming together. So in addition to HPD, in addition to the prosecutor's office, hopefully getting them more funding, these other groups that help to match these homeless folks who hang out in Chinatown with services elsewhere. Hopefully that gets them out of being concentrated in this very small area where there's a lot of potential for bad things to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Chulan, the judiciary in our state is not elected. They are appointed. So you can hold our elected officials, like you were talking about, like the prosecutor even, to task if you have an issue with this. But how do you get your message through to the judiciary if you think that that is part of the issue right now? What steps are you taking to try to engage them on this? Is there anything that you can do on that front?
Well, on every opportunity I have, I talk to judges and I help them understand it's not just about a civil rights issue. It's about the total well-being of the individual who are the perpetrator. And we are not helping them by turning them back to repeated behavior that's antisocial, also a danger to their health. So we can't help somebody who cannot take care of themselves. And so yet we allow them back on the street to not take care of themselves. So this is not the way to help this individual. We understand that there's a suspension of his civil rights, but when he's out of his mind on drugs, he cannot decide for the best of himself. So the court has to be the ward to do that. And there are multiple layers of protection for the court to say, okay, we have the data, we have the police report, we have the mental health, we have all these reports. So it is not to me, it just doesn't make any good sense to not apply these various methods to help this individual as a ward of the court. And in other countries, they've done that successfully. So I think sometimes our civil rights is overblown. And I always tell them, I said, if this individual that you keep turning back on the streets is dead, so what help have you given him? You need to ask that question. His life or his temporary? If he went to jail, he's also suspending his civil rights to up to a certain point. Treatment is not suspending his civil rights. In fact, we're enhancing his life. So we need to change our thinking on that. America about freedom and liberty, because you cannot have freedom and liberty if you don't have responsibility. And you live in a community and you do have responsibility to your community when your negative behavior impacts hundreds of people.
Yeah,
and
let's
also
talk a little
costs us a lot of money. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that community and what that looks like moving forward. In your mind, Chilan, we'll stay with you here first. What do you think is still needed in the area? If you could maybe put together your, top few issues or things that you still feel are lacking, what do you think still needs to be done that is not being addressed right now in the area?
Of course, there's a lot of frustration from law enforcement. Arresting, they're coming out, thumbing their nose at you, and they are violating the law. So most people in the community want them arrested, or even if they are not put in jail, we build a database to show where the needs are. So number one, police officers must enforce the law that are in the books. Sit lie, personal possession, loitering. These kind of things are very anti-business and anti-tourist safety. We have a lot of safety issue because these individuals are not just quietly sitting down there, but they are actively engaged in drug taking, smoking their pipes. They have vicious dogs. They have weapons. They are a danger. So when things erupt on this unpredictable behavior, other people's lives are endangered. So we want law enforcement on the books for sidewalk violations, and then we also want a humane way to deal with this individual to help them in the long run. If jail is one aspect to sober them up, yes. So, and there's also multi-pronged activities. We have CORE, which actually engage the homeless over and over and over And I was told that you got to engage over more than a dozen times to even get them. And I hope more churches will come out, because religion is a very powerful motivation for folks on drugs. Because if they believe in a higher being, they can help them, motivate them into reducing their drug use and believing in something. I think a lot of it is people gave up, and so they just want to get high, and they think that's one way to escape their problems. So
I
if
want to
we
bring,
can have more social workers to do
yeah,
some of this work, and religious leaders to come down, and the city, the government are trying their best, but the community as a whole, uh, we also need to look at the healing aspect of these individuals and not say, oh, they're bad people. Uh,
yeah,
everybody
I want to.
deserve a second chance. Yeah.
Sure. I want to bring Tyler into this conversation about what some of the obstacles or issues that continue to exist in your eyes. What are some of the things that you're hearing that residents still feel that there needs to be improvement on within the area?
Yeah, I think over the long term, there's a couple of things that we need to do. Chinatown, if you go in the mornings, it's very active. All the, fruit and vegetable vendors are open. The restaurants are open through lunchtime. But then you start to get into the afternoon. And as, the fruit and vegetable vendors close up, the restaurants close up, it really starts to become dead after, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. And when that happens in that vacuum, then some of the negative element really comes in. We saw last several months ago, that young girl got shot on Hotel Street late at night. There's really nothing else around there. And so one thing that needs to happen over the next few years is just more activity. And how do we cultivate and catalyze more activity throughout the day and into the evening? We're starting to see some more restaurants stay open late on Mauna Kea Street, which is awesome. But then, on all the other side streets, how do we have a constant buzz of activity that will hopefully kind of naturally push out some of the dangerous elements? So that's one piece. I'm really excited to see, more affordable housing projects come into Chinatown. There's been a plan for a hotel to come in, and that'll of course have people at all hours, walking around activating these spaces. So I think that's one really important thing. Another piece that's really important is, as Chulan mentioned, the CORE program, which is the pairs of social workers and sort of healthcare professionals go around and deal with the homeless folks' immediate needs, match them up with services. We need to make sure that this program is maintained, it's made permanent, and they can continue their work. But at the end of the day, the homeless folks in Chinatown need somewhere to go. If there's no shelter beds, if there's no, services that we can match them with, it's all for naught. We're just going to end up shuffling them to some other neighborhood. And so that's why I think we need to work with the mayor's administration to have a really robust plan to expand our shelter spaces, expand our social services, and, work with the nonprofit providers as well to make sure we have somewhere that these folks can go that isn't just lying on Beretania Street or King Street or River Street.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the CORE program. Well, that's one of the services that this administration has stood up, using a lot of that COVID money. What do you think the success of that has been? Tyler, let's start with you on that. And do you think that this is something that should be extended?
Absolutely. I think that this has been transformational. If you look at Pauahi Street, that one stretch of Pauahi Street where River of Life was, if you take that from 4 years ago until now, it's night and day. There's still, difficult homeless folks in Chinatown, people who have refused, every service that's ever been offered. And there's only so much you can do for them. But for the people where there's a little bit of an open door, CORE has really helped them. And I've seen it firsthand. I've been out with the CORE volunteers and other folks and observed as they interact with these folks. So that's been really, really transformational. I hope that we're able to expand CORE beyond just Chinatown and get them to the other encampments, in the surrounding community. In the base of Pacific Heights, there's an encampment. There's some under the bridges in Kalihi. And certainly in Palama and Iwalei, there's a bunch of encampments. And we need to use this CORE model from Chinatown and expand that further. Because again, if all we're doing is pushing them out of Chinatown, they're going to end up somewhere else. And so we need to have the CORE program in those surrounding communities as well.
Yeah, Chulan, what are your thoughts on the core program? It is a significant investment from the city. We're talking about millions of dollars into this program. Do you think that the money has been well spent?
I think it's a very significant improvement because, number one, core is city funded, so it has to be accountable. A lot of times, in the past, politicians rely on nonprofits. We can't have them accountable because it is very difficult to audit a nonprofit and say, "Oh, you didn't, you claim that you put 200 people in this and that." It's very difficult to really audit that. Whereas when you have a city program, we know that our funds got to be accounted for, and there is a significant um, clarity and trust that we know that they have to be accountable to the taxpayers. To me, I applaud that because I've worked with nonprofits for years and years, and it's a touch and go. It's a yes and no. It's here and there, but never as solid as having core. So I really want core to stay as a permanent city services, and it's also cheaper in the long run not to exhaust our emergency services. And the core workers are familiar with the individuals needing help. So we have a whole list of people that we know by first name because we have a group that are very familiar with them. So we have that working relationship with core, with HBD, with IHS. And sometimes when you look at employees, nonprofit cannot hire really good people by paying them good wages. Whereas when people are employed by the city, they have a permanent position. So the stability of the programs is much stronger and than with any nonprofits. They would hope to do something, but sometimes they cannot because they don't have the manpower or the skills. Whereas with city hires, you have very specific guidelines. So there is that level of credibility and trust. So, yes, absolutely. Put money in that.
I want to talk a little bit more as we wrap up this conversation about some of the things that are happening right now to, as we talked about the improvements that are happening within Chinatown. Tyler, if you can speak to a project that was recently announced and being underway, which is improvement to the sidewalks and the areas there, how businesses might be impacted and what people should be aware of about this new venture that the city is doing to help improve the conditions down there.
Sure. I'm very thrilled that the city is going to be starting sidewalk repair in the Chinatown as well as the downtown area. That actually started on Monday, and it's going to go until August. They will be notifying the businesses along the streets where work's going to happen 2 weeks in advance. But, this is, I think, an illustration of the importance of the administration and the city government on the whole communicating with area stakeholders. And so, when we heard that this was happening, my team from my office went down with flyers in English, and we had it translated into Chinese and Vietnamese to talk with the businesses so that they know this is happening over the next few months. They're going to get another notice. We want to make sure they know now to expect this. And I think everybody's happy that these improvements are happening. Before we started the show, we also talked about some of the previous things that happened in Chinatown. For example, the bulb outs or the yellow bag trash program. And those programs, had very good intentions, I'm sure, but there just was really a lack of communication and engagement with the stakeholders, which led to those things being really unpopular. And so want to make sure that we're constantly talking with the stakeholders there so that what we try to do, actually results in improvements. There's buy-in and it can be a success. So, that's why we want to make sure for the sidewalks and any other thing that comes down the line, we're talking with the neighborhood board members like Chulan, talking with the businesses and talking with the residents on the whole.
Our time is almost up here, but we did want to kind of allow you a final thought here, Chulan. As someone who has been involved, and this is kind of recapping everything that we've discussed today, but involved in this community and seeing it through many different, illustrations or conditions that it has gone through. What is your hope for Chinatown moving forward, and what you've seen over the last few months that get you excited?
I think hope is the word. And also, I want to thank Tyler for translating those flyers because the city was pretty lacking in timely notification. So thank you so much for doing that. And then we definitely will have a lot to talk about with DTS. On the whole, hope, and also this is the oldest Chinatown in the United States. Data shows 1789 as starting Chinatown. So this is a jewel, like every mayor says. And we have an obligation to protect and preserve and improve the life, the shopping, the visiting, and all of us have a lot of heritage here. So it is our Chinatown, and we need to make efforts to make it safe, make it prosperous, make it the envy of every other city, that we have a very durable, engaging, and interesting Chinatown. And like, that's my hope.
And Tyler, for you, your thoughts about the future of this community as you navigate through this, as you know, as a newly elected council member and someone that is still getting your feet wet, so to speak, in some of the issues that are happening down there. But what your vision for this area moving forward?
You know, there are a lot of good things happening, and we're starting to take the very first steps. And I commend the mayor for his attention to what's going on in Chinatown. So, you know, we're going to be working and continuing to work on the homelessness issue, working on the crime issue. And part of it also, as I mentioned before, is generating more natural organic activity. That's by having, you know, more affordable housing down there, so there are people at all hours walking around, you know, hopefully finding ways to get the restaurants and others to stay open, you know, later, so that people come on down. And over the next few years, I think we're going to see a revitalization of some of the other public spaces in and around Chinatown. Along River Street, you know, Ala Park has really been cleaned up in a really positive way, and we're going to hopefully keep on seeing that. You know, Chulan mentioned that we have to keep Chinatown as a crown jewel of you know, our community, and that's not just we as a city. That's we as individuals. And so I want to invite, you know, the viewers to, if you haven't been down to Chinatown recently, come on down. You know, go get some dim sum, go get some noodles, go do some shopping, go pick up, you know, some manapua, and really check it out. And you know, it's not what you might see in the negative headlines, but there's a lot of positive things coming along. And please come on down, see it for yourself, and be part of this transformation.
Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos-Tam and community advocate and neighborhood board member Chulan Schubert-Kwock, thank you both for being here today and talking to us about Chinatown. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Aloha.
We hear a lot of hope there, Ryan, from both of them on this issue. And it's something that, you know, as we mentioned off the top, every mayor in recent memory has pledged to revitalize this area. And you see it in different ways. The Caldwell administration with those bulb outs that Tyler referenced, and also the yellow bag program that they had put in place to try to physically clean up the area that was sort of a dud in the end. Lots of good intentions we've seen throughout the years from, you know, all sides, whether it's, you know, nonprofit organizations or elected officials. But this time, this mayor is saying that this will be different, and he's made this a real priority for his administration. And you hear from both of our guests today that they have similar hopes. Yeah,
the hope is there, and they also recognize that there is more that needs to be done, especially as we heard from Chulan, that imploring of the really helping to crack down on the crime that has gotten better, as she said, and with the removal of the feeding of the homeless of the River of Life facility that was down there, that has now been relocated, and not having the homeless feeding in the area has certainly helped to reduce some of the footprint of homeless in the area, and also crime. But that crime does still exist, and looking for stronger enforcement on the police end, enforcing the laws, as she said, that are on the books, but also imploring the judiciary to also uphold their end, and making sure that these criminals who are arrested are charged and are sentenced and go through that process, and so that they are aware of some of the impacts that they have into the community, but also recognizing and finding a way to identify those repeat offenders in the area to avoid some future conflicts that happen down the line. But again, a lot of hope and a lot of activity happening with hotels opening up in the area, new restaurants and opportunities as well, really helping to lift that area that has become a priority for this administration.
Yeah, I mean, I recently went down with my family for the Lunar New Year celebration, and you can feel that there is a difference in just the last few years of what is happening in Chinatown. So I would echo the council members' encouragement to head on down there and check out some of the new restaurants and businesses that have opened, and those old time favorites that have endured throughout the pandemic. I mean, you just think about what these businesses have been through in the last 4 years. We talk a lot about supporting local, and now would be a good time to do just that. You heard both of them also full-throated support there for the core program. That is something that the city used a lot of those COVID dollars to stand up, something that is somewhat innovative and new in addressing the homeless issue and also taking some of the pressure off of EMT and HPD, EMS rather, and HPD when it comes to addressing some of the physical needs of the homeless folks in that area. It takes a lot of interactions. You heard the council member say it could take up to, or I can't remember which one of our guests said, it can take up to 12 engagements before they actually are able to sort of get someone to agree to get treatment and go into services. But that last piece really there that the council member talked about, not having the shelter beds, that is the next piece that we need. And you heard that Connie Mitchell say the same thing over at Institute for Human Services, that we need to have the shelter space to get these folks into treatment and services so that we can fundamentally change the problems that we are seeing. But really great to get that update on Chinatown, Ryan, and you know, a real hopeful feeling for both of our guests.
Yeah, and someone who has recently moved into the area, a few streets down, I would say, maybe not in Chinatown, will be our guest on Friday. We will be speaking with First Lady Green, who will be joining us here on this program. She will be talking about some of the initiatives of her stepping into this new role. Of course, the wife of Governor Josh Green, and how she plans to navigate this new role. Some of her priorities, we already know that there have been some events that have happened at Washington Place and the governor's residence, but wanted to get an update from her on how she's settling into this new role as First Lady, as well as hear some of her priorities as she begins this role, as she stands alongside her husband for the next 4 years in this capacity leading the state. So we look forward to that conversation. We hope we see you right back here on Spotlight Hawaii on Friday. Until then, take care and aloha.
Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.